Welcome to our March monthly workshop. And as all of you know, a part of acquiring tenure, or a part of your evaluation of your professional development as a professor, is acquiring funding. So today we have a series on acquiring funding, how to write a grant, and all those good things. And our guest speaker today is Mr. Paul Tuttle, and he is the Director of Proposal Development here at North Carolina A&T. So he knows all the ins and outs and all the tricks to help you as you would like to, if you're attempting to acquire some external funding. So, floor is yours, Paul.
Thank you. Much appreciated. As Evelyn said, my name is Paul Tuttle. I'm the Director of Proposal Development here, and I will be happy to be interrupted during my presentation, but I also warn you I'm going to be going very quickly. So if you do not catch something, go ahead and stop me, and I'll be glad to either say it again, because I know I have a southern accent. I'll be glad to say it again and or explain. Okay? So this is really Grants 101. Hopefully it'll be tailored a little bit to what you all need. I understand that you all are graduate students who are thinking of entering the professoriate, yes?
Yes.
Okay. So this is the same kind of presentation that I would give to a junior faculty member, except step back just one step, recognizing where you all are. So again, if you don't understand, just let me know. The first thing that we need to do is think about what the context is, really, for grants. And there's a lot of different contexts. Evelyn has already presented one of the contexts, which is that you will most likely need funding in order to do your research. And you'll have to get that from some external source. So that's one of the contexts. And of course, you can also get funding to do better teaching and better service, community service and public outreach kinds of activities. So as you all know, a faculty member's position is all wrapped up in teaching, research, and service. And research is often called scholarly activity, because when you have a terminal degree, that means that you have been certified to create new knowledge. That's what it's all about. You have been told that now you can be an independent investigator and you can create new knowledge. So in order to create this new knowledge, you'll have to stand on the shoulders of giants, which is why you have to do literature reviews. You'll have to do a dissertation, which is your first research investigation, and also presumably your first either set of articles or your first book. Hint, hint. Because if a tree falls in the forest and no one hears it, has it fallen? Does it make an impact? It's the same thing with your ideas. If they're not published, do they make an impact? We're not sure. So that's why there's the requirement to publish or perish, which you all have also heard about, I'm sure. So let's talk about the funding piece, because you often have to have support in order to make these research investigations happen. So let's talk about two different kinds of funding landscapes. First, the federal funding landscape. And if you can't see this here, there's also a screen at the back where you can also see this information. And it should be large enough for you to see from wherever you are. So there's two basic funding landscapes, one in the United States. One is the federal funding landscape, and the other one is the foundation funding landscape. And the monies come into the university through two different offices. One is the Division of Research and Economic Development, which typically does most of the federal funding landscape, and the Office of University Advancement, which does mostly the foundation funding landscape. That's not an exact split, because occasionally, very occasionally, they handle some things in the federal government, and very, very occasionally we handle some things in the foundation landscape, but in general, that's the split. So let's talk about the federal funding landscape first. Our federal government, or at least some of us, think that, depending on political ideology, think that the federal government is here for a reason. And one of those reasons is to support people in creating new knowledge in the scientific and technological innovation enterprise. For example, some of our federal agencies supported cell phones. Some of our federal agencies supported the internet, not just Gore. Some agencies have supported different kinds of advances in nutrition, in agriculture, in the things that make our lives better, in transportation safety. So all of these different areas we support. Now, how do they support them? They support them by funding people like you to do research investigations. So, what do you think the federal government means by research?
Investigating.
Investigating. Let's add systematically to it.
Okay.
With an aim toward creating new knowledge of benefit to our country and society, okay, in general. And there are two different kinds of research. One is basic and one is applied. Basic research, to summarize, is all about finding out how things work and just doing things for the pleasure of understanding how things work. The basic fundamental processes of, for instance, biology, of different forms of engineering, etc. How certain kinds of mathematical equations work. Without any kind of thought to the application, the possibility of applying this information to anything. Just how does it work? In contrast, applied research looks for a place where that knowledge can be used, can be applied. We know how rubber is made, so how can we apply it to make automobile tires and O-rings for space shuttles and things like that? How can we apply that knowledge in order to make these things happen? So that's the main difference between basic and applied research. Going on down the slide, the foundation funding landscape is different. It tends to fund programs that benefit society, not investigations into new knowledge. So foundations tend to take existing ideas and existing truths and existing knowledge, and they fund programs that help people. And so they provide solutions to social problems, typically. And so that's why I put up here thought leadership in providing solutions, and also collaborations among foundations and policymakers and government. The largest foundations and the largest organizations actually do influence governmental spending and vice versa. Foundations like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, organizations like the World Health Organization, those kinds of very large-scale national and international organizations, they have tremendous influence on the way in which we decide to spend our money in our governments. Okay? So I just wanted to give you all a context, a very broad, and I hope very deep, but also very fast context about the kind of landscape that you'll want to play in. Okay. So where does that funding landscape come from in terms of the federal government? That funding landscape comes from the President's budget request. And some of you, especially some of you who are from the United States, have seen Schoolhouse Rock on Saturday mornings, how a bill becomes a law, all that sort of thing, and you understand how government works. Essentially what happens every spring is that current presidential administration sets out a budget request. It's called a request because the president's arm of government does not hold the power of the purse. Instead, the legislature holds the power of the purse. So this is a request, it's a signal, it says this is what the presidential administration wants. And then friends of that administration start writing bills that go through the appropriations process. So then in each house, the House of Representatives and the Senate, In each of those, the bills go through these appropriations committees. People discuss, people write them up, people argue, people debate, and then they come to some agreement or some compromise if it's not an agreement. And then from there, the two different House and the Senate committees come together and rewrite the bills again, debating, again compromising, again agreeing, or not, depending. And finally they have some appropriations bills that go up the ladder to the president to sign. And you all know that if the president vetoes the bill, then the Congress can override that veto by a vote of 2/3. However, that's very difficult, and that doesn't often happen. So I'm just saying that's how it works, okay? It's a relic of Enlightenment age thinking, but this clumsy way of doing things and doing it every single year has happened ever since our nation was formed. And it's important for these reasons up here on the slide. It sets priority areas, it sets policy areas, it defines parameters for the appropriations committees to think about, which they can use or not. They can decide they want different parameters, as when a recent administration said we don't want any more TRIO programs, and the Congress said, oh no, we do want TRIO programs, and we're going to make sure we fund TRIO programs. And that has happened twice or 3 times in the last 15 years. So that's just one example of congressional appropriations people leaving in things that the administration wants taken out, and vice versa. And then, of course, this over time defines an administration's agenda and its signature accomplishments. So that's what it's all about at the federal level. And most of you all are going to be working with federal agencies, correct? I'm assuming? Yes, I'm assuming. Okay. All right. Let's take a look at what some would feel is a horrifying slide. On the left, in the beige, is where the money comes from. Our wallets. Taxes. Etc. You see corporate income taxes, individual income taxes, Social Security taxes, taxes. Right? Our wallets. On the right, the blue is where the money goes. Our spending, or what we tell our representatives to do with our money. I have to say that way. It is our money, it is our government. We are a representative democracy. In the middle is the scary part. The red arrow pointing down. This is from 2011. That number has increased. That arrow is larger. If this graphic were created today, that arrow would be a good bit larger based on certain decisions that have recently happened in the federal government. But I want to point out something interesting. These two little octopus arms, labeled discretionary, and these mandatory, they mean what you think they mean. Congress cannot touch these. Everything related to Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid cannot pull money out of there to fund the rest of the government. Instead, when we talk about budget negotiations and where the money should be reallocated, the only place it really happens is right here, in the discretionary parts. Defense, $895 billion in 2011, and other discretionary, $520 billion. Again, this is 2011. Okay. Sorry, that was a smart board. I accidentally touched it. So basically, I wanted to remind you all that all of the discussion and all of the debate is only in those top right categories. And almost always, defense appropriations bills are passed before anything else, because we have to have security before we can do anything else with our lives. Think about that. So here at the university, as I've said, DORED handles grants, contracts, and cooperative agreements. And advancement handles gifts, donations, contributions, and other traditional philanthropy and fundraising. And as I explained before, the last bullet point on either section, research is typically funded by the federal government, which is systematic investigations that generate new knowledge, and foundations typically fund programs benefiting society. So in either case, you have to have evidence that your project was successful in some way. That's called project evaluation. We'll talk about that in a little bit. So here are some typical sponsored program purposes. We call them sponsored programs in the field, in the business, because they are sponsored by an external agency, an external funding agency. So as you can see, research is only one of the different possible purposes for which you might request funding from an external sponsoring agency. There's also student support, a variety of those, teaching, public service, and community outreach. This is a repeat of a little bit of what I said before there. Okay, so this is the realm you're going to be playing in. How do you prepare yourself? Let's talk about that. You'll need to think about developing a research funding plan. And this is basically that outline of your research trajectory, your ideas, your plans, your goals, all of that connects all of what you want to do with the funding landscape. And it's all about, you see the purpose here, advancing scholarship. Not only your scholarship, but the scholarship of your field. You're going to be contributing to your field. And you're going to be facilitating your progress in grant awards, publications, speaking engagements, and or career goals by looking at it this way. So let's talk about what these characteristics are of a research plan. The first is actually the third down. You've got to have a unifying technique or problem or theme. Some brand. You're going to be a particular professor of X. What is X? How are you going to describe yourself? Particularly when you're on the job market, particularly when you're sending out grant proposals. That description of that brand is going to require your unique skill set. As you know, when you do your master's thesis or your doctoral dissertation, you become an expert in your particular area of study. And quite often you are the expert in your particular very narrow, very deep niche. So think about that. Think about how you define yourself, how you think about your career, how you think about what you will do in the next 5, 10, 15, 30, 40 years. Think about that. And then, of course, the time element, what I just said, 5, 10, 15, because you're going to have short-term and mid-range and long-term goals, and then some well-thought-out ideas, some plans. Now, these plans are not be-all and end-all plans. These plans are going to be flexible enough, but they're going to give you a structure. And you're going to think about exactly what you want to do, playing within that structure, and revisit the plan probably at least every year. And let me show you what I mean. I'm not going to go there next. Instead, I'm going to ask you to look at the strategic information plan template. I'm going to pull out of this and take a look at your handout, strategic funding plan informational template, looking like so. Okay, let me show you how to read this. At the far left margin, these are prompts for you to think about how you want to define yourself and describe yourself. The indented, italicized, together, collectively, are responses to those prompts and also a narrative. Let me explain. When I wrote this, I imagined that I was an assistant professor of smart materials engineering in the mechanical engineering department, and I was a woman of color looking initially for new investigator support and pilot funding. So this is Dr. X. This is her first statement of who she is and where she is right now in the present. Then, if you scroll down, she is also a member of the ERC, the Engineering Research Center, the NSF-funded ERC. Working in the smart sensor subfield, she already has a Department of Defense Congressionally Directed Medical Research Programs Award, and she is developing miniaturized sensors to detect battlefield shock. And she wants to develop wearable diagnostic devices. This is realistic because we already have cameras that go into the eye socket that connect to the optic nerve that allow a human being to see shadows and shapes. Not quite in color yet, but at least shadows and shapes. So we are becoming readied as a culture to become cyborgs. We already have prostheses, and we already have certain kinds of implants. We're getting ready for the next step, having these wearable devices that actually interact with the body's chemistry and with the body's neurological system. Okay? Further on down, the prompts are the questions that are driving her research, the key topic areas, her optimal sponsors or specific programs that she thinks will fund her, as well as the dollar figures that she needs for support. Here she says, this is what I want to know. I'm interested in investigating these things. How smart sensors can interact effectively and efficiently with the body's nervous and electrical system in order to provide ongoing data streams. For example, if you had someone who was getting older, like me, and had high blood pressure, like me, then you could have an implant. I don't know how it would be powered. Maybe through a battery or maybe through mitochondrial DNA. I don't know. But it would be powered somehow, and it would be giving wirelessly, streaming information every few minutes about the high blood pressure. And so you would see patterns over time. It would be almost as good as being hooked up in the hospital to one of those systems that measure your high blood pressure and your heart rate and your respirations and all of that. Evelyn.
So the smart sensors would be considered the basic research, and then how they interact in the body would be considered the applied research? Or?
The smart sensors might themselves be considered applied. And then before that, those individual neurological and chemical interactions with the body, those investigations of whether X or Y or Z solution can work would be basic research. So, yeah. But the smart sensors and the way in which they interact would definitely be on the applied end of that. Mm-hmm. Thanks for asking that. Mm-hmm. And then she says here that she wants specific programs and specific dollars, and this is what she needs. I'm going on to the next page. This is what she needs programmatically over the next 4 to 7 years. And she's talking about scale up, and she's estimating how much money for the scale up over how many projects, over how many years, what period of time. And then look at the very bold thing that she says here at the end. She says, I hope to become one of the go-to researchers in wearable sensors and smart devices in both military and civilian environments in the next 15 to 20 years. She has set out for herself a branding goal. She wants to become this person. She wants to be famous for this. Think about that. Think about what do you want to be known for? Okay? Another way of asking this question is, at your retirement reception, yes, that'll be 30, 35, 40, 45 years maybe. At your retirement reception, what do you want people to say about you in terms of your research? What accomplishments do you wish? At this point, and yes, this is just a plan, this is just dreaming ahead, that's fine, but it helps you get some context and some perspective and also a structure to move forward. That structure can be rearranged, reconstituted, reformulated, that's fine. But these kinds of prompts and this way of thinking will help you at least put your first steps on that path. And then, of course, later on, here's a timeline with a matrix, and this is something that you can use for for actually finding funding opportunities that will help you go forward along that path. And let me show you an example, that the last page. Let me rotate the view clockwise. Okay, let me make a point here. This page, one page, shows 15 years. Year 1, year 3, year 5 as an assistant professor. Year 1, year 3, year 5 as an associate professor. Year 1, year 3, year 5 as a full professor. 15 years of your professional life is right there on the page. You can use this for an annual report, for a personal strategic plan, for something that you can put beside your computer monitor to remind you, this is what I'm needing to do as a researcher, as an investigator, as a future expert in smart sensors and diagnostics, or whatever that is. So this really helps you stay on point. And this shows the NIH specific treadmill of how to get on the treadmill and then moving forward. 135, 135, 135. This shows that, but there are other kinds of treadmills.
So I guess I'm confused of when you would write this, or is this something that you just keep developing over
This is
time?
something that you would keep developing over time.
Okay.
And you can come back to it at the end of every semester, at the end of every year, however often you want to come back to it. You've at least got a plan. Because without a plan, life happens to you. You know, and you don't have agency. What I'm trying to help you understand is that you too can have agency, and you can decide, I want to go after X, Y, Z in this order because I think that it will help me build my professional skills, help me build my reputation, help me create new knowledge according to a sequence, according to a pattern over this period of time. But yes, definitely it's something that you want to start now, and this can be perhaps just the first 5 years if you're not sure, right? You can start with just that first category, that first column. But then after that, you can think about, okay, if I want to be a future center director, or I want to be a future dean, or I want to be a future provost, or whatever, how do I go along the different academic ranks? How do I move from assistant to associate to full? How do I move administratively if I wish to become an administrator? How do I move administratively toward being a chair, toward being a dean, toward being an associate provost, toward being a provost if I want to do that? Or other kinds of paths. There are lots of paths. Vice Chancellor for Research is a path. And by the way, it's now open. Just saying. But just wanted to let you know that this is, all humor aside, this is a way to help you all structure your thinking here at the beginning of your career and leave it flexible. In answer to your question, leave it flexible. Go ahead and say, this is what I want to do right now. Come back to it and watch your ideas change and become more nuanced, more complex, and more interesting even. And it will continue to pull you forward. That whole planning sense. But yes, please have a plan. Because without a plan, life is going to happen to you instead of you happening to life. Any other questions about this? I wish somebody had told me this when I was this age. Whatever. But I took a very different route, and now I'm the Director of Proposal Development, instead of being a Professor of Business and Technical Writing, which is what I had originally intended to be. So I think this is much more fulfilling, to be quite honest. Be that as it may. You can always bloom where you're planted. Okay, so from current slide, once you have that plan, and we're going to talk about how to look for funding for that plan and all that sort of thing. So that's going to come in just a moment. So assume that you've already found some funding, right, for your plan. You would decide on that very first project. You would take that very first baby step toward your goals. Let me warn you of something. Everyone wants to solve the world in 3 to 5 years and $25,000. You can't. You can't go to the moon for that amount. You certainly can't go farther than that for that amount of money. So think about, what do you need to do? What is a small pilot project that will let you, in a very carefully defined space, with carefully defined time parameters and funding parameters, actually create new knowledge? Some of it, yes, can be incremental. And some funders do in fact fund incremental basic research, where you're constantly building on the previous information that you did during your graduate program. The information that you created during your graduate program. So think about that, and think about what partners you will need, what resources you will need. There are also new or junior faculty or early career faculty funds for you, especially in the NSF and NIH and DoD. There's young investigator programs in the DoD, all sorts of things. So look for those. Look for those specifically for where you are in your career stage. And that will help you, give you a boost. Because people know that it is difficult to become an independent investigator. And if it's hard to do that, then what you might want to do is partner with others in your future department, wherever you land. Partner with others and figure out a way to contribute to that overall project while you do your thing and publish based on your thing, your piece, and make sure that at every point you know the end result. I plan to publish X in Y journal. I plan to publish X in Z book chapter. I plan to present at ABC conference. Always have that scholarly productivity in mind, because that's what you're there for. You have a PhD, or you will have, by that point, you will have a PhD that will be the stamp of approval for you to create that new knowledge. So remember that the whole point is creating the new knowledge. All this investigation is not just to have a wonderful time in the lab playing with the beakers. That's not the point of the investigation. The point of the investigation is, what have you learned? What is the new knowledge that you created? And how can you then share it with other people so that they can benefit from it as well? Okay. I sound like a preacher, I know, but what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to help you constantly come back to the main point, which is that you are ready to produce new knowledge. And then, of course, you will want to, in planning your research trajectory, you would want to determine who will fund you mostly, and get to know those folks, and learn how to talk with a program officer, and understand what their mission and priorities and funding mechanisms and cycles are, and understand what their review processes are, so that you can be successful. And then, of course, you would need to select a funding opportunity. We'll talk about looking for funding in just a moment. You'll need to select a funding opportunity and prepare to talk with the program officer using a concept paper, and we'll talk about a concept paper in just a moment as well. Okay. So, what I want you to do, if you would, is take a look with me at the North Carolina A&T website. Click Research. Click Researchers, because that's you. Go all the way down to Proposal Development. Remember what we just did? NorthCarolinaANT.edu, Research, and then Researchers on the left. And then all the way down to Proposal Development. Then, once you click on this middle bullet point, you get all these proposal development resources. This is a strong hint to all of you that you have a lot of information out there that can help you. So I'm going to click on How to Join Pivot, because that's one of your handouts. Pivot used to be the community of science. It originally was almost like a Facebook for academic types. Well, the 1980s version of Facebook for academic types. It was a place where people could sign up and put their picture and their CV, various elements of their CV, and then it was a searchable tool for finding other people and for enabling yourself to be found by others in order to partner with others. It was a true community of science. It added, very soon after that, very soon after it began, it added funding opportunities. And so now you can either search for people and be searched for, or you can search for and find funding. So when you use these instructions to join, and yes, I'm the Pivot administrator, so at different campuses, people either allow or do not allow graduate students to join. I'm allowing you all to join. So when you join, using these instructions here, you'll find out that this is, and there are also some instructions, some YouTube instructions, and some other kinds of how-to videos, and I'll also do how to search for funding using Pivot once a semester at least, and you can sign up for that. Just another hint, it's happening in April. April 23rd, I believe. But when you play in this database, you'll find that it has over 50 billion, that's a B, billion dollars worth of opportunities from funding agencies all over the world. So think about that. When you do your advanced searching, you need to think about whether or not you want funding from Japan, Bahrain, South Africa, Italy, European Union, Canada, or us, just to give some examples. You'll want to think about that. And you'll want to think about the search parameters, where you'll be doing the work. Will you be doing the work here, back in your home country, back in a different country? Lots of different opportunities, lots of different options. And also there are options for graduate students, for postdocs, and for junior or early career investigators. That you can check that little box and say, this is me, I'd like information on funding for me where I am right now in my career. And you'll see that. But I would advise you to do that. As I say in the instructions, you'll need to sign up from a North Carolina A&T computer or while you're in the North Carolina A&T domain. Otherwise, it'll start asking for a credit card very soon, and it'll be very, very pricey at the per person rate. We pay for it for you so that it's free to you. So please start on a North Carolina A&T computer. And then after that, after you join, you can sign in from anywhere. And that'll help you search for funding. I won't demonstrate now because we don't have time. But I do demonstrate at other times, as I said, at least once a semester. And there are YouTube videos for you all on the ProQuest and or Pivot channel. Okay. The other thing I want to show you is another handout. How to write a concept paper. Hanover Grants, now Hanover Research, was my previous employer before I came back to North Carolina A&T in February 2015. And I wrote this how-to guide. So let me just say, here are some typical elements of a concept paper. First is an introduction. It's designed to draw the attention. It's designed to excite the reader to read further. Think about those things. Don't make it boring. Make it interesting so that the reader will actually want to read further. Program officer you're sending this to is getting concept papers from literally thousands of people across the United States at least. Okay? So you'll want to stand out in a good way by being interesting. Second, you'll need to think about the background or need or rationale or some combination of those ideas. You stand on the shoulders of giants, but there's a gap. This has not been studied before, right? Same thing that you did with your master's thesis or your doctoral dissertation. You see an opportunity for you to go in and create new knowledge in an area that has not been studied before, or some aspect of some area that has not been studied before. You need to define that carefully and quickly so that the person will continue to be interested and move on to your project description, which will have goals and objectives, activities, methodology, an action plan, a timeline, and anticipated benefits or outcomes. This is what you're going to get money for. You don't get money for a great lit review, because lots of people can do a great lit review. You get money for describing what you will do to either fill or partly fill that gap of knowledge, how you will create that new knowledge, and what that project will do in order to create that new knowledge. Then fourth section is the support or budget, and then the fifth is the contact information. And we can talk about this at length later, but this is a general way of understanding a concept paper. Typically it's 1 to 2 pages. Yes, 1 to 2 pages. Not tiny font either, it needs to be readable. And you need to be able to say it as though you were speaking to a lay audience, a person who does not have your technical expertise. Because the program officer may not know exactly what you know. And so you'll have to make a connection to the program officer. And this will help you, in talking with the program officer, understand how closely your idea fits that program officer's funding opportunities. Oh, I need to say something here. Many of us think of getting grant funding as doing this. Oliver Twist, please sir, may I have some more? Right? Many of us think that way. It's not that at all. Looking for funding is this. You're wanting to find a collaborator. They want to invest in you, and you are going to want to invest your time and energy in helping them. They have priorities. They have goals for that money. They want to fulfill certain things in the world, accomplish certain things in the world through that money. They want you to partner with them to help them do that. You're coming forward as, I can be a good partner. I know how to do this. I and my team can help you out. That's how you want to come across. Not, please, I'm begging for cash. Because we see people who beg for cash. And many of us don't get that cash because we say, well, why don't you tell me why I should give you some cash? Well, this is your opportunity to say, this is why you should give me some cash. I need the money in order to help you, the funding agency organization, to help you do what you do in the world. I'm going to help you create a new way of training soldiers. I'm going to help you establish a way of identifying a certain kind of an infection in the human body that hasn't been done that way before. I'm going to help you create a new material that can be used in a specific way that's absolutely necessary right now for national security, etc. I'm going to help you, the funding agency. It's always about partnerships. It's always about investment. It's always about making sure that you can assist the funding agency in doing what they do. Okay. I'm going to get out of this. Go back to finding funding. Sorry. Here we go. Okay. So subscription databases, I just told you about Pivot. There's also other things that are free to you because you're a taxpayer in this country. Grants.gov is free to you, as well as the NIH Guide and NSF funding website. There's also FedBizOps in the Foundation Center. Grants.gov is, as the name implies, all about grants. Federal Business Opportunities, FedBizOps, is all about contracts. And the Foundation Center is all about different foundation opportunities. In terms of setting up funding alerts, you can set them up from most of these different search tools. For example, in Pivot, if you do a search and you like the results, you can simply say save. And I'd like for new information to come to me every Sunday for that forthcoming week. And you can go back to your home page and rerun the search anytime you want to see those search results that you really liked. So, now, I'm assuming that you have a plan, that you have identified a funding opportunity that you want to target as one of your first steps on the plan. I'm assuming that you understand that funder, you've looked at their website, you understand their mission and priorities and all of that, you understand how to come forward and say, I would like for you to invest in me to do this kind of work. Now it's time to develop the proposal, okay? So, read the solicitation, read the RFP, read it again, read it backwards, read it in a different language, read it, read it, read it, read it, read it. Always, reading is fundamental. If anything is unclear, if it's counterintuitive, if it's self-contradictory, yes, people make mistakes, then you can ask your friendly sponsor programs office or division of research representative, like me here, or people in the sponsor programs office here, or the PO, the program officer. You can always talk to the program officer and say, this is confusing. On page 4, you say this, but on page 17, you say that. And it seems to contradict each other. So can you please explain? And they will answer that, usually very quickly. Always, always, always determine what needs to be completed. What is the proposal going to look like? Typically, it's going to look like forms and attachments or uploads that go along with those forms. And for us on this campus, if you're sure that you're going to submit a proposal, you need to submit an internal notice of intent form, NOI, which means that we get a heads up that you need help in developing your proposal. And we give you that help. We give you a specific response, targeted response that says, these are the people who can help you, and they reach out to you. And they say, hi, my name is, I can help you do X. Second person says, I can help you do Y. Third person says, I can help you do Z. We reach out proactively to assist. Step 3, create a task list or timeline. You see how I am about structure? It helps you survive in a very, very busy world. We are all extremely busy. Go ahead and create something that looks like a plan that will help you get your proposal done. Build in enough time, build in alternate plans because life happens. Set up your meetings, send invitations, get on people's calendars. Is step 4. You need to also make an appointment with yourself to write. Because as you all know, writing takes thinking. And many of us have to be either very quiet, or very alone, or very something in order to write well. So think about what that is. Think about what those characteristics of that writing environment are. Make an appointment with yourself to do that, including when you're at your first job. Many people actually say, I have teaching times, I have advising times, or office hours, and then I have research time. And many people go and hide somewhere so that they are not near a telephone, and not near their students, and not near colleagues, so that they can go and think alone and write. Probably because most of us are introverts. But if you're an extrovert, you can always set aside time to strike sparks off of your friends, intellectually speaking, by being in groups and discuss collaboratively how to write. Okay, step 5. You're going to want to share your work with other people on the team. What is that website? Is it going to be Google Docs, Dropbox, Box, SharePoint? What is it going to be? And remember that some people use Mac and some people use PC. We're all different. It has to be accessible to everyone. Start sharing is step 6. Start sharing and critiquing the work. Build in the controls for that. How do you know that it's good? Because you can't just wait until the end and say, gosh, those 20 pages that you sent me back in February, it's now August, and they're not good, and it's due in 3 days. Well, that's not good for the process. You need to tell people reasonably close to when they send it to you, this is or is not what we need. Step 7, same point. Continue to assess the amount, quality, pace of work. And make sure you also, step 8, think of it as coming together as one message. The proposal will have a title page, or a cover sheet. It'll have all sorts of information there, including your dollar figure for your request. You'll have an abstract, you'll have a narrative, you'll have all manner of bio sketches, you'll have all manner of other pieces to your proposal, a budget justification, all of that. Let me tell you a brief horror story. I have actually seen a proposal that had 4 different numbers for its request for funding. One number was on the cover sheet, one number was in the abstract, one number was in the narrative, and one number was in the budget. Oh, and 5. Another number was in the budget narrative. You want it all to be the same. You want it all to have the same message. You don't want somebody to call you up and say, did 5 different people write this proposal? And you have to embarrassingly say, yeah. Well, what's the problem? Well, you have 5 different numbers. It needs to be an integrated whole with a single voice and purpose and intent. It needs to sound as though one individual wrote it. Step 9, you're going to have barriers. So be gracious, be creative. Remember that you'll work with these people again. You can't afford to be rude. They can't afford to be rude to you. Remind them of that if they are rude. Some people, when they get stressed out, they get rude. What you need to do is you need to pull them down from the ceiling or the clouds or wherever they are and pull them down and say, okay, I get it. You're anxious and nervous. I get it. I am also anxious and nervous. What we need to do is get this done. We can't have all of this drama. We need to just get this done. Come on, help me get this done. I understand that you're upset and anxious, nervous, whatever, and it makes you crazy. I get that. I'm also crazy, but I'm trying to hide it. So let's do this. Let's make it happen. Make sure that there's a backup plan. Every single big proposal that I've been involved with, somebody has been late or never with their piece. So you have to have a backup plan. Step 10, finish on time and under budget, psychologically speaking, because you are also doing everything else in your life. You're being a daughter, mother, spouse. You're being perhaps a grandparent. You're being an aunt or a cousin. You're being a teacher. You're being an advisor. You're being a researcher on other projects. You're doing a lot of different things in your life. This is not the only thing that happens. You cannot afford to concentrate just on it for a week or 2 weeks. You've got other things going on in your life. So think about how to do it while also recognizing all the other things that are going on. And some hints and tips very, very quickly. Many people create a draft budget first because they realize they're creating a project that is designed to spend money in pursuit of its goals. Remember that. So the budget answers these questions. What do the PI and her team intend to do with the money? How will the activities progress over time? The narrative is also called a justification. Why do you need this budget item? Bio sketches, they're easy to create if you ask for them early. So go ahead and ask for them early. Don't wait until the end and have somebody come at you with a tremendously huge document and say, can you help me reduce this to the 2-page requirement? Because you won't have time. Letters of commitment. These are all about what does the partner commit to doing in the proposal. If you ask for support letters, or if you talk about support letters, they'll say, oh yeah, sure, I support it, it's wonderful. That means nothing. That just means that somebody was happy in that moment and wanted to sign their name on some letter that said, I support this, I think it's a good idea. Instead, what agencies want is, how will this specific partner assist in the activities of the project? And if you need to, you can write their drafts for them. And we have examples on our website where you saw the proposal development resources. Institutional data. Data are big. You've heard the phrase big data. Data are huge. And it takes sometimes a long time to get institutional data at some institutions. So if you go to an institution where it is notoriously slow to get institutional data, and you need to know how many people are coming from XYZ demographic group in to the university as first-year students, then you need to ask for that. You need to ask for it as early as possible. And you need to make sure that you can get the right data and that you can assess the quality of those data that you receive upon receipt. Because I also have seen it where people have said, well, you know, it's December, I asked for this in August, I got it in November, but I didn't have a chance to look at it, and it's not what I want. And then the institutional research person says, I'm so sorry, it'll take another 3 months to get it to you. Well, you're done, because then you can't submit that proposal because you don't have the information. So, just a warning, make sure that you ask for the data early and check them when you get them. Then there are ancillary documents, facilities and other resources statements. Basically, this is what we have at our institution. We have that on our website. Data management plans, etc. Can be customized, can and should be customized to your specific project. So keep in mind these things as well, that also are supposed to give that single message of the proposal. They cannot be afterthoughts, and you have to make sure that you include them in your task list and timeline. So the narrative. Does it truly tell the story? And is it a coherent, compelling story? Think about that. And let's look at the second bullet point here. Is that effect sufficiently powerful to induce funders to open their wallets? Now, we're not talking about just persuasion here. We're talking about persuasion plus funding. You and I are persuaded multiple times a day to believe something. Sure, that's easy, because you don't have a stake in it. There's no risk. You don't have to open your wallet and say, here's some money. But now you're asking the funders to open their wallets or their checkbook, and I need some money to do this. That's a very different kind of request. Be sure that what you are asking for, the way in which you're asking for it as well, make sure that that induces people to give you the money. Not just to say, oh yeah, I agree, it's a great idea. Because if they just say, I agree, it's a great idea, they might not go further and say, and you will be funded by our organization. You need to complete that sentence. You need to complete that thought with the funding. And you need to also make very sure that you've addressed all of the review criteria so that they can actually give the money to you. Because I have had experiences in the past where somebody had a great idea, a wonderful, persuasive, compelling story, but because they left out something or they did something incorrectly per the requirements, then the organization couldn't give them the money. They just couldn't, because it was not ethical. One more thing. The abstract, typically written last, but it's also in some ways the most important thing. It has to introduce the proposal. Many reviewers, as I say here, say that this is the first proposal element that they read, and it has to act as a public document. It goes into awards databases. So if you are doing anything even mildly controversial, such as effects of different kinds of anti-HIV drugs on college students' sexual practices, then you want to be very clear that this is what I'm doing and this is what I'm not doing in language that is not explosive. And just wanted to let you know, congressional representatives do pull interesting, provocative language from awards databases and say, you're funding this? So if you're doing anything controversial, think about that. And it typically serves as the project description in those databases. So this is a whole series of submitting proposals, how to follow the internal process. You can read this yourself. What kinds of questions, if you'll allow me the time to have questions, I don't know, we're over time. Do you think we have time for one or two questions?
Yeah, sure. That's what this is all about for them to learn. So
okay.
If you guys have some questions for him, that would be great.
I guess typically when you submit a proposal based on the work that you've done, what would be what would be the next steps after, say, like I know you submitted one and you've had like a rejection or something? Do you look for the next one?
Well, there are different ways to handle that. Some people get very upset and depressed and decide that they don't want to submit any more proposals again. That's suicide. That's career suicide.
Right.
What you need to do is you need to say, okay, everyone gets rejected. It's like the dating game. Everyone gets rejected at some point in their life. For whatever reason, I just got rejected, that's fine, whatever. What can I learn from this? In most cases, there will be reviewers' comments. Somebody here in the Division of Research, if you're here, can help you interpret those comments, can help you think about how to respond to the program officer, to ask, how can I do this better? How can I strengthen my proposal the next time around? You can look for either the same opportunity the next funding cycle, typically the next year, or you can look for an alternate funding opportunity or some combination of the two. But we can help you with that, and we do help you with that here at the Division of Research. And most universities, wherever you land, most universities will have that function as well. It's called the decline proposal process. And people might even have it on their websites. Other questions?
What would be the best advice you could give them as doctoral students, as far as most will be graduating soon, and they'll be in different landscapes, different schools, different places, just maybe some words of wisdom that perhaps you see professors encountering very frequently. Something that you would have told yourself. Yes.
Two things. Number one, find ways to keep the excitement, to maintain that sense of excitement, of interest, of being motivated about what you do. Because you'll need to keep that sense of excitement for several decades. It may change, it may shift, you may go in different directions as technologies change, or as, well, let's call them what they are, scientific fads change. It'll take you in different directions. But keep that sense of excitement, number one. Number two, science is social. Remember that, science is social. We are almost unique on this planet in not only remembering what we did and what our parents did, but also what our culture did and what our civilization did and what humanity did. Okay? That in and of itself is a social record of what we have accomplished in terms of the nuances and of the advances that we've had over time. It's also social in a very broad way. We're all working as, right now, we're in a cohort, a virtual cohort of people who are all at our same level, right? Everyone across the nation and the world who is working in the same approximate discipline is in your cohort. Get to know them. They're potential partners. Talk to people at conferences. If you're an introvert, hello, I am. People said in high school, I can't believe, Paul, that you say that you're going to be a teacher because you're so nervous standing up in front of a group of people, so nervous that your knees are visibly shaking, your voice is shaking, all of that. I had to get over that. And I had to put myself forward. I had to learn what it is to be social in a professional environment. That is also what you all are going to have to do. You're going to have to learn what the social cues and the social folkways and mores are within your discipline, and what is and is not acceptable. You'll have to learn that. You'll have to learn how to push the envelope, because you're going to be bringing in new ideas, some of which may be controversial. Some things you find out may be something that a whole group of people don't want you to see, don't want you to understand, don't want you to have discovered. So think about that. Science is social. And think about ways to make sure that you get that reputation, that brand. This is who I am. Come forward and say, this is my expertise. You don't have to be arrogant and say, no one else has this expertise in the entire world. unless of course that's true. You also don't have to be unduly self-effacing by saying, well, you know, I kind of work on the cure for the common cold, but I'm not sure I know what I'm doing. No, you have to be somewhere in the middle, confident and assertive, and talking to people and saying, I'd like to partner with you. I would really enjoy working with you. And, you know, I'm at X, Y, and Z at a conference. We want to work on this in the future. We want to move this forward.
So thank you, Paul. Everyone, let's give him a hand. Mr. Tuttle, Paul Tuttle.
You're very welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, fellows, so I do believe our next